and welcome to One Resource Floating. I am your host this week, me, the one with the mostest, Kayla, and I'm joined by the 86, Ben, and Crass, or how he would be preferred. Do you prefer your real name or your Discord name?
You can say Chris. That's fine.
Okay, it's Chris. Oh, so different.
Close enough.
Far off.
It's even better if you're like, my name is Joaquin, and it's like, wow, where'd you get Crass from?
Javier was
No.
my class in high school. You can choose that. That's fine.
There we go.
We can just call
That's
him Mr. Arcane Damage.
Mr. Actually, I'll call him Mr. Runeblade because he has been playing it for so long and he's so good at it. I've never met a better Runeblade player than him.
Oh, how sweet.
He really is. Like, he was on all levels except physical Runeblade. But no, we're not talking about Runeblades today. We did that last week. This week we are talking about the first ever wizard in the world of Flesh and Blood, and that is Kano. I don't even know the adult name. It's like Kano.
Draco of Ether, something like that.
Just Kano.
That's the young one.
That's the young one. What's the old one's name?
It's Draco of Aether.
Kano, the worst man alive.
Pretty sure. I think it's Dragon of Ether.
Okay.
One of Ether.
Shows how much CC I play.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, so who knew he had a full name? It was just Kano. But that's why we brought Chris along, because as not the first Kano from the store, but probably the most frequent Kano in the store, you definitely have destroyed many of us with your stupid, alright, pitch 3 for Kano. So we brought you on to talk about it.
I'm going to interrupt. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's Dracai. So Drakai?
Like Drakai?
Hi.
Drakai of Aether?
Yeah.
Ivy. I guess it's wherever you emphasis. Drakai.
Okay.
It's
And
the same
also
as
the
like
Mirror Mint first edition is going for 144. That's the rainbow foil. Sorry,
Good to know.
I just saw that and I was like, wow.
that's rainbow foil.
I'm willing to bet that the Rainbow Foil Adult's probably cheaper than the Rainbow Foil Young hero. Which is not the case with anyone else, but I think that's probably the case for him.
I can see it.
By far. So, Chris, tell us about Kano.
Okay, so basically Kano, the reason you want to play Kano is you like evasive damage, and you like damage that's, because of that, hard to block. So Kano is exclusively arcane outside of, you can make some builds with some physical damage, or you can run Nourishing Emptiness to get benefits from basically playing no other physical attacks in the deck. But really, it's playing non-attack actions that deal arcane damage in large chunks, and chunks that are large enough that your opponent can't effectively block it. He also has the unique ability to play consistently at instant speed, meaning that he is good at both basically pressuring people on your own turn, but also putting pressure on their own turn, because if they don't have extra resources at the end of their turn, you can choose to basically start going after them at the end of their turn. It's a little bit riskier. You have cards to get around it to mitigate that risk. That's why there's kind of two different fields of Kano players. I typically like to play on my own turn, and then I really only play on the opponent's turn if I'm pushing for game. Some players like to just, if there's any time to go off on the opponent's turn, they have no resources left, they can't defend themselves, that's fine too, but Kano gives you that opportunity to do both. So he's a threat at any time. Also, why he only has 15 health.
The running joke of, it is not your turn, it's our turn. It's our turn.
Always our turn.
It's just Kano's turn, actually. It's just, I'm giving you the privilege of acting on my turn.
Yes.
Pretty much. It's honestly how it feels like every time.
Yeah, because it's like, I'm going to play an attack, and they're like, alright, my priority now? It's like, yeah, you know what, just go. At the end of it all, like, there's been so many times at the end of, like, combat chains, and I'm like, whose turn is it actually? Like, who draws up now?
See, that's the thing is, once you get used to it, it's fine. But until you get used to playing against the Kano may just have to say, "Excuse me, I decide when this turn ends." So hold on.
Yes.
And if I am correct, if I have this right, if Kano goes back and plays an instant at the end, that does open up the combat chain again. So if you are the player that, and you said, okay, my turn's done, Kano did stuff, and you're like, okay, you know what? now's the time I'm going to get him because I see an opening, or he has less cards in his hand. This is the time where you can come back to Kano and kind of maybe put a dent in him.
Yep,
Yeah.
same idea as if you're playing a Prism. I know you probably haven't gotten to Prism yet, but essentially Prism has a lot of instants they can play at the end of an opponent's turn. But that refreshes basically the priority. So I can say I'm passing my turn. My opponent who plays something at instant speed plays something. You then basically get your priority back to respond to it. So it's one of those things you gotta understand that instant and priority aspect of the game as Kano.
It's a lot.
And it's not just like priority doesn't mean that you can necessarily do something. You still have to have some sort of action point, or like if you attacked with Scar for Scar with less health, and that means Scar for Scar gets its go again. If you're just like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna Arsenal pass, and then a Kano were to start doing some Kano stuff, at the end you'd be like, well, I had go again off that Scar for Scar. I'm gonna use that now. You totally can, because he basically opened up the window for more things to happen.
Yeah. Another reason why, if you're playing on the opponent's turn as Kano, I'm in the camp of it should be for game. Or at least so much damage that you're guaranteeing game back on the next time that you can play.
Yeah, pretty much the next time you throw like a Voltic Bolt, it's game anyways.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Yep. Yeah, so really with Kano, that's your bread and butter is basically getting out there with enough damage that goes over the top. But that being said, we'll probably get into this a bit later too. There's also a field of Kano that goes wide. I don't typically play the wide version. That uses cards like Reverberate, Snapbacks, very low to the ground costs. But then you run into, basically, it depends on how much Arcane Barrier your opponent's playing. And that's also very key. That ultimately decides what kind of deck, or how effective at least your deck will be as Kano. Because in Blitz you don't get the sideboard, so.
You're facing a Kano, your armor is going to change quite a bit, because against like a runeblade who has rune chants, which all pop for one, having one arcane barrier, you feel more secure in your choices of equipment. But with Kano, 3 doesn't feel like enough. And
3
you'll
is
be
the
like,
bare minimum.
3 is the bare minimum, and you still feel like, I wish I could do one more, but typically the 4th armor piece you want is something you need to keep the game in your favor. So it's like, do you give up Courage of Bladehold to put in null rune armor? Like, it just doesn't feel right, but it's honestly, it's never enough to just run 3.
Yeah.
Kind of brings the point to, when Kano's dealing damage, I either don't care, or I do care, or I wish I cared.
Yeah.
And I don't
3
know
stages.
until I'm done.
The 3 stages.
Do I care? Do I care? Don't I care? I did care. I should care.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's life thresholds too. You'll learn playing against Kanos enough that there are certain, based on how much Arcane Barrier you're running, you have life thresholds that you must not hit, or you're basically guaranteeing you die if they have a combo.
I think the key damage that I know that Chris will do is 15. Like, it's 14 or 15 or something.
14.
Yep. 14's a reasonable assumption that he can do that on any given turn.
So it's always like, I gotta
Butter.
stay at 15 health the entire game. Which is really hard, considering, like, that's only 1 extra than he gets.
Yep.
But still, like, you start at 20 health and you're already like, oh, it's not enough. Also, I was about to say, I started thinking, I was like, oh man, if you're going up against a Kano, don't run Skullcap. It's not worth it. We can
Never
talk
run
about that
Skullcap.
later. We can talk about armor for Kano and armor against Kano. Skullcap's not worth it. Just
So
put away your shiny legendary. It's not needed here.
we've talked a lot about what Kano can do, but just to say it, I know we put it up on screen, but it's a 3-cost instant. It's look at the top card of your deck. If it's a non-attack action card, you may banish it. If you do, you may play it this turn as though it were an instant. And this is the thing that really gets scary, because it's essentially Kano's playing slots.
Yeah.
And he can win or he can lose.
He's a gambling man.
Say that. Could say that. Depends on how you play the Kano, I
I
guess.
say there's ways to set your deck.
Yeah, I was gonna say more often than not, the only time I will ever blindly Kano is either number one, I have to. So basically, it's game if I don't and don't pull something off the top for lethal back. Or two, if I just have an extra blue and nothing to do with it, and trying to go for a 2-spell turn, which is that's your ultimate goal as Kano, is if you can get off 2 of your non-attack spells a turn, basically, then you're in a pretty good position. So sometimes that includes pitching a blue to play something from hand, and then pitching your other blue, holding something in hand for pitch, and just seeing what you get off the top with Kano. That can be fine too, but more often than not, if you build a Kano deck pretty well, you shouldn't have a ton of misses with the Kano, because the key there is that it's a non-attack. So anything that is an attack action is a whiff, which in my deck I only run one, that's Nourishing Emptiness. And then anything else that could be a miss could be... Basically, the other miss in my deck is Eye of Ophidia. So it's a resource gem. It doesn't count as a non-attack. But that being said, everything else is a hit. And that includes not only your attacks that you're going to be sending their way with Kano, but that includes your potions. So your potions of Deja Vu, your energy potions, your clarity potions, those can come right off the top, go right onto the field, and there you go. That's set up for later. And it's also non-attack in general. It's not specifically wizard non-attack, which comes into play with Sonic Booms. Since Kano is just any non-attack, not only with the potions too, but your Tome of Findall is great too. I like Tome of Findall.
That's the one I was thinking about when you said any action that's non-attack. I was like, yeah, you've popped off a few Tome of Findalls from your Kano, and then you draw 2 cards, and it's disgusting.
Yep. Draw a few more blues, then you can just keep going.
Disgusting.
Mentioning like your colors, what do you typically run color-wise in your deck?
So color-wise for Kano, I think you have to be pretty strict. If you're running more of a go tall Kano, which is what I run typically, you're going to need quite a bit of blues. You just need a lot of blues in Kano in general. I'd say the least you can probably run effectively is you'd really be pushing it at like 16 blues. I'd argue 18 is probably what I would recommend at the least, and then upwards of like 22 blues. In terms of how many I run in my current deck, I think I run 20 or 21, something in that realm. So I run quite a bit.
I imagine you at least have like the 2 copies of all your staples, and then your Eye of Ophidia is probably that 1 extra blue, which is making your numbers odd.
Yeah, I think I may actually be even, because I think 1 Eye and 1 Clarity Potion as singles. Actually, no, because then I have 1 Scour. So yeah, there we go. And then everything else is 2-ups, but yeah. So yeah, you run basically almost all blues in terms of half your deck is blues roughly. Then at that point, you need to decide which of his yellows you're going to run. Because if you look into Kano cards, a lot of his really good cards are yellow, which makes the pitch kind of awkward, but that's why, maybe that's a way to nerf it in sorts. Surely they'd be way overpowered if they were blue, so... and those are your cards like your Sonic Boom, your Chain Lightning, and your Lessons in Lava.
Yep.
And then also I throw Tome of Findall in there because I think that's an excellent card too. So those are 4 yellows that you can run a different set of. I usually run max sets of those, except for in this current build I am running just 1 Chain Lightning. I've recently looked into some builds. Another great resource is Kotaro on the Discord. He's probably the best Blitz Kano advice you can find. And I saw he was only running 1 Chain Lightning in his build, and I can kind of see why. Just because there's a higher mass of reds now if you're running Ether Wildfire. So, so I can see that being the cut versus you still want your 2 Sonic Booms, your 2 Lessons in Lava, and your 2 Tomes. So you have your blues, you have your yellows, then basically you just fill in your good reds from there and what you want your reds to be. Which, generally speaking, since I play a taller Kano, I play Ether Spindle, I play 2 Forked Lightning, I play 1 Ether Wildfire, I play 2 Red Voltic Bolts, basically anything that can help me get over the top. In the other school of Kano that runs lower to the ground but wider, you'll see like 2 Red Snapbacks, 2 Ether Wildfires, you'll see maybe even Red Reverberates, things that basically can combo a ton off of a single turn. But again, since those have less arcane damage associated with them, if your opponent runs really high null rune, then they can just break those combos down. Because a lot of his combos rely on dealing some sort of damage.
Yeah, because multiple 3-4 arcane attacks is not going to actually do as much damage as just one 10 arcane.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's where his evasiveness comes from, is because I can play, technically speaking, 3 red snapbacks on a turn for 9, but you can technically block out all 3 of those with 3 blues and 3 null rune. Whereas if I'm playing a single stir forked combo that's 14 damage, then you can only at max, if you're running Arcane Barrier 3, then you can only max block 3 of it. Unless you're running Crown of Seeds or something like that, obviously, or Steadfast, things like that for Guardian. But so then you're doing 11 damage they can't deal with.
So I do kind of want to step back before we go forward here, because there's a lot of cards, and I'm just putting them up on the screen. I'm not going to be able to do that. So maybe let's talk about a couple of the key cards in this and how they interact. And the first one you mentioned earlier, when you were talking about these yellows specifically, that I heard you say was Sonic Boom.
Yes.
And so tell us how you use Sonic Boom, what it sets up, and essentially, to read that for everybody, it's deal 3 arcane damage to opposing hero. If Sonic Boom deals damage, look at the top card of your deck. If it's a wizard non-attack action card, you may banish it. If you do, play it this turn as though it were an instant. It costs X resource points less to play, where X is the damage dealt by Sonic Boom.
Yeah, lots of text, but basically it's a high damage dealing card. That's what you're using it for. So the way you're using Sonic Boom typically is a lot of it depends on the null rune your opponent's playing. If your opponent's playing, I like to assume the standard null rune you're going to run against is 3. So if you're running against 3 null rune, Sonic Boom's doing 3 damage. You're not really going to get anything off that, because its effect is basically requiring a hit of some sort of arcane damage. So that's when you use... So the weapon I always use with Kano, we'll go ahead and talk about that too, is Crucible of Aetherweave. That is an instant. It's an instant that you can do once per turn, but it doesn't break, as most weapons typically anyway. So once per turn instant, you pay 1 resource. The next, I believe it's specifically non-attack. Maybe it's card. Let me look really quick. Okay, it's next card. So the next card you play that deals arcane damage instead deals that much +1. So with Sonic Boom, it costs 2 resources. So if you pitch a blue, you can play it for 2, buff it with 1 with the weapon. Now you're coming in with 4. So 4 arcane damage off the effect. If your opponent's playing Null Rune 3, standard speaking wise, that should let something through. So what happens with Sonic Boom is if any damage goes through, then there's 2 ways to go about it. The blind way to go about it is to just play your Sonic Boom, let it hit, and then just see what comes off the top. As long as it's not at least in my deck, Eye of Ophidia or Nourishing Emptiness, it's likely going to hit something playable. Now you can still whiff on Tome of Fyendal's anything non-wizard, but it's likely going to hit something playable, and then chances are if it's a low attack, like if it's like a Zap or a Scalding Rain, basically anything that's costing 1 or less, that's going to be free for me on that attack. So yeah, Sonic Boom comes in for 4, they can only block 3, 1 hits. Something comes off the top of my deck that's 1 or less, it's free, it's more arcane damage. I can also decide what I want to do with it. Maybe I hit a Chain Lightning, that's a whole different card that opens up a whole different line. So basically, you can decide what you want to do with that card, and it can be a huge combo piece. So, Sonic Boom just basically can start some really nutty turns. You can set up your Sonic Booms. Maybe you have some opt off some different cards you play in your deck. There's a ton of opt in the deck. you can see that Sonic Boom is on the top of your deck, and you can see the next few cards under it, and you can pick which one it's going to hit. That's probably the best way to play Sonic Boom, is if you see Sonic Boom, see something you like under it, just keep that right there, keep that stack nice and fresh, and then play off the top that way.
So, also, I'm not a Kano expert by any means, but what do you think about also using Lesson and Lava to set up Sonic Boom? So that'd be the next card I think you mentioned.
Yeah, Lesson and Lava is excellent. It makes, so the thing is, I think that's an excellent way to get a lot more damage off the turn, because you can combo pretty well off the Sonic Boom. So I'll go ahead and actually read off Lesson and Lava really quick, because that's important to know too. So it's a yellow that costs 1, so it's one of his special yellows that you usually run 2 of. So it costs 1. It does 3 arcane damage at baseline. Again, you can always buff it with different ways in the deck or with your weapon. But it does 3 at baseline, and if it deals damage, you may search your deck for a wizard card with resource cost less than or equal to the damage dealt by it. So, say with Lesson and Lava, Sonic Boom, it depends. It's harder to get if they run a lot of Null Rune. You're going to have to really buff the Lesson and Lava up to make sure you can hit that. But, so say, again, you're facing someone with a standard Null Rune 3, basically Lessons and Lava, pump it with your weapon, it becomes 4 arcane, they block 3 of it, does 1 damage. What that means is you can search your deck for any wizard, basically wizard non-attack action that costs 1 or less, put it on top of your deck. Then that allows you to Kano it off. So basically meaning you pay 3 for your Kano effect, and you can then play that card, whatever you put on the top of your deck. So if you can afford to put a Sonic Boom up there, meaning that Lessons in Lava hits for 2 or more, then the Sonic Boom you play, then that's just a lot more damage from there. Maybe you'll get insanely lucky. Maybe you'll go Lessons in Lava into Sonic Boom into Blazing Ether when they have no resources left to block you, and then you'll just probably take the game there. That's fine. But Lessons in Lava is one of those things too. It also it sets up your combos. That's the hard part about Kano, and what makes him the most complex to play is you have to know what each card in your deck does, and you have so many ways to tutor and to plan out your deck with Opt that because there's so many ways to combo, you just have to think of any line you could have at any time and what the best line is. And Lessons of Lava is one of those cards that just opens up so much room for that, because it can reach for just about any card in your deck if it hits. But yeah, so then, going back to Sonic Boom, basically, it's there for your huge damage combo turns. It's fine to just play without knowing what's on the top of your deck, because more often than not, it will hit something, and that's just more damage for you. Or chances are it could also hit something that just makes your turn go wild, like a Tome of Ether Wind, things like that. So, no, Sonic Boom's amazing. I think I'd have a hard time thinking any deck would run less than max. And then going back to Lessons in Lava too, I have a hard time finding any deck that run less than max.
I think it goes understated that in Flesh and Blood how effective tutor effects are, like Lesson and Lava. Like they enable the turns that are going to win you the game. It's ridiculous.
Well, even Lesson and Lava, it's like it searches for something that deals or that costs less than the damage you dealt. Blazing Ether costs 0.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
1 or less. Lessons in Lava.
Yeah.
Love Lessons of Lava into Lessons of Lava into Blazing Ether. That's a very, if they don't have anything to block with, that's an easy 12 damage for very resource cost besides the Kano.
Everyone froze. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, we froze in real life because that was ridiculous. No,
All right. So we've talked a little bit about how his best sort of stacking your turns for massive arcane damage. But I do feel like Kano is one of those heroes who's very equipment dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And if sometimes you don't have the right equipment, it can get difficult.
He's expensive. And a sword. You need his level, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, for his head, like, honestly, you can't get better than Talismanic Lens, in my opinion. Yeah. I mean, for him, you don't need fancy things for his head. He can just wear the Talismanic Lens, because for those turns where, like you do, where it's time to clinch the game, that Op 2 is going to make or break it.
Yeah.
And then Chest, pretty much Tunic, probably.
Yeah,
Just
pretty
because-
much Tunic, except for the mirror. Except for the mirror, you'd run Rope Rapture, but that's cheaper then.
That's because it has Arcane Barrier 1 in it.
Yeah, Rope Rapture has Arcane Barrier, that's why.
Okay.
Rope
it has
Rapture is
Arcane
also
Barrier
just gain 3 resources, isn't it?
Yeah.
That doesn't cost
Yeah.
anything.
It uses your action point, but yeah, you get 2 resources.
Action.
So you can only use the 3 resources to Kano. But in a match against Kano, where having 3 resources and an Arcane Barrier is probably very useful.
Mhm.
Hands.
Yep.
Where you put
Metacarp.
all these hands.
It's for the purpose, yeah.
They haven't actually made multiples for Wizard yet, as far as equipment.
Nodes.
And
Yes, so Metacarpus nodes are interesting. So they're essentially at least a free extra damage. So what they do is basically when a wizard non-attack action is played, you can pay a resource and add an additional arcane damage onto that effect. That being said, they last until, I believe, the end of turn specifically. So it exactly says whenever you play a card with an effect that deals arcane damage, you may pay a resource. If you do that effect, deals that much arcane damage +1, and at the beginning of the end phase, destroy it. Yeah, exactly. So the thing with the beginning at the end phase is that multiple ways to use Metacarpus nodes. The most efficient way is with your combo with Forked Lightning. Forked Lightning is a card. If you're going tall with Kano, it's a red that costs 3 resources that deals 2 different instances of 2 arcane damage. Any effect that increases arcane damage on a card does so at a double rate, basically. It affects both procs, and those are coming still from a single source of a card, so you can only use your Arcane Barrier once for the total damage, but it's basically an odd way of saying that anything you buff does double the buff. So Metacarpus nodes is really efficient on your Forked Lightning because it's 1 resource and it adds 2 extra damage. Metacarpus nodes can also be procced multiple times in a turn. So if you're going wide with Kano, you can pay a resource, add +1 to an attack. Later down the line, with another non-attack action wizard card that's dealing arcane, you can then pay another resource to add another one to that. Because until the end phase, that Metacarpus is ready. Once you hit the end phase, it's gone, though. But typically, if you want good value out of Metacarpus, you want 2 damage from it. Whether it's from a Forked Lightning or you're using it twice on a turn that you're going wider.
And even Forked Lightning, if you Crucible it and Metacarpus node it, like, just keep that in mind. Like, that's damage that you have guaranteed.
Yeah, that's still a good amount of damage.
From the 2 resources, using your weapon and your arm piece equals 4 extra damage on Forked Lightning. So...
Yeah. Because Forked Lightning, in my opinion, is probably one of the most busted cards as far as like how it works, and that it deals. It's literally just deal 2 arcane, deal 2 arcane. But the key thing is that when you stack Forked Lightning, you stack each text that says deal 2 arcane +1. So that's then now like deal 3 arcane, deal 3 arcane. But the stupid part, and the reason I hate the card so much, is that when you are defending against Forked Lightning, it comes in as 1 source, not the 2 that the person is multiplying, but 1 source. So now the 6 arcane you can only block with 1 little array.
Yep.
It's stupid.
Yep,
That's
how
how
you go to the top.
All Kano works, yeah.
Yeah, if Forked Lightning's your kill card, basically. If you're playing a tall Kano, you'll see Forked Lightning in the arsenal often. I don't like it as much in the arsenal as I like Stir the Ether Winds, which is typically the card in that combo you'll put in there because it works with more cards. So Stir the Ether Winds, I'll go ahead and read that out too. So it is a, typically speaking, you play the red version in Kano because that's where you get its value. It's a red non-attack wizard action. It costs 2 resources. So the red version states you may play your next wizard non-attack action card this turn as though it were an instant. So that's important because 1, since it costs 2, your boots, which we'll talk about in a second for Kano, cost 1. A single blue can play Storm Strider or can play Stir the Ether Winds out on your opponent's turn, then still allow the next non-attack action from your hand to be an instant. you don't have to Kano out the card as an instant from the top of your deck. You can still play a card from your hand as an instant because of Stir the Ether Wind's effect. But the rest of the effect states if it has an effect that deals arcane damage. So that's also important, the if there. If you play a card after Stir the Ether Wind that doesn't deal arcane damage, it eats the effect. So you can't double up Stir the Ether Winds. You can't play Stir into something and get both effects.
I never realized that, actually.
Yeah, it's an effect. So so that's important to note, that whatever you want to buff with Stir needs to come next. And then after that is the buff. So it says, basically, the next card, if it does an effect that deals arcane damage, will instead deal that much arcane damage plus 3 on the red version. And then that scales down to 2 and 1 for the yellow and the blue. So really, in Kano, you're typically just playing the red. Icelander plays the blue, but that's a whole different story. So with red, Stir the Ether Winds onto a Forked Lightning. Since you're buffing it by 3, you're buffing it really by 6. And that's where the kill combo comes from. So basically, if you're playing Kano, your ultimate goal is to, on your opponent's turn, if they have no resources, or even if they do have a blue, that just determines what their kill threshold is. So say they have Arcane Barrier 3, you're going to be dealing 14 damage. So if they're at 11 health, you're basically guaranteeing game. Because what you're doing is you're playing out your Stir the Ether Winds. That's going to give 3 damage to your next attack. You're going to play your weapon, which is give +1. Your Metacarpus node just +1, but that comes after the fact. But anyway, that's 5 buff damage. Onto Forked Lightning, that's 10 buff damage. So Forked Lightning goes from being deal 2 to basically deal 7, which comes in as a single source of 14. So that's 4 damage with only... And then if you're going really crazy and you know you have a Blazing Ether off the top, you can just pitch your blue or blow up some energy potions to play that Blazing Ether off the top of your deck for repeating that damage.
Fun. Yeah.
And that's
disgusting.
Your game. For sure. So yeah, that's the kill combo, and that's basically where the last part of your equipment comes in, your main piece. That's your Storm Striders. That's his legendary. There's not a good alternative. There's just not an alternative even close. If you're gonna play Kano, you just have to get the Storm Strider.
If you're playing him in limited, you pretty much have to play Mage Master Boots if you get them, just so you can get.
I was gonna say, in limited, you're
able to get more attacks
unless you miraculously pull the boots.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I think he is very dependent on his armor for just the boots in general, because without those, your turn, like you doing things on your opponent's turn when they've exhausted themselves dry, just doesn't have as much of a bite as it does thanks to the boots.
Yeah, because what they do is it's at instant speed, it costs 1 resource, and what it does is whenever you pay the 1 resource and destroy the boots, the next non-attack action you play can be played as an instant. So the thing with Kano is, sure, he can play as an instant any time, but that's off the top of your deck. So unless you have some opt at the ready to do that, or you know what's on the top of your deck, maybe you opted last turn pretty well, like you played an Ether Spindle and opted for like 6. That's happened before. You've set up your next turn too. So Kano's ability allows you to play off the top at an instant speed, but Storm Shard lets you play out of the hand and the arsenal at instant speed.
Yeah.
And that just changes completely what you can do and what you can plan out. It can only happen once, so really Storm Striders, you're either pushing so much damage that you're guaranteeing game within a turn or 2, or more often than not, you're playing the Storm Striders out because you're guaranteeing game. And with Kano, it's one of those things, it's a deck you know when game is, because you know how much your opponent can defend. It's harder against Guardians because they have cards like Steadfast now. That's why some Kanos are even playing a card called Chains of Imminence. I've seen a lot of Kanos play it specifically against Guardians so they can name Steadfast, and that way them or Guardian, whichever, cannot play Steadfast in response, because that's an instant speed card that can negate up to 6 damage. I
haven't seen Chains of Eminence since the Chain meta. Oh my gosh. I forgot that card existed.
There's some Kano.
Didn't Lee run that in Bolton?
Back when in the Chain meta, a lot of decks ran it because you just had to stop Riftmine and Seeds of Agony.
During Chain meta, I ran it in Dorinthia.
I ran it in my Bolton.
Like, no matter what, you just go Seeds.
Yep, you just say Seeds. And a lot of the times, if the chain player, like the way I used to play chain all the time was I kept a ton of cards in banished. I took a lot of blood debt to set up later turns that were just crazy, and a lot of times that meant leaving a couple seeds into the blood debt, into your banished. So you ended up taking a lot of damage off Chains of Eminence. But anyway, for like Kano's purpose, you would use that for Steadfast, and that's it. Maybe against some things you can call some things, but
I think Steadfast is just your best option in that case.
Yeah, exactly. So, really speaking, outside of that particular instance, when it comes to Kano, you know how much your opponent can defend at any given time. It's not like a regular attack where your opponent can throw one card to defend it, or they can throw all four to defend it in case you had attack reactions or something like that. With Kano, if you know they have 3 Null Rune and that's all they have, you know they can block 3 of that damage. So if you can do that 3 damage plus however much health they have, then you know what your game is. So Kano, in that instance, you can almost call a bit of a goldfish deck. There are a lot of times people will play me and just see me sitting there fiddling with my deck, playing about 10 cards out, opting about 3 different cards, looking for the exact combo that does the exact damage per game because you have all that information in front of you.
I love it when you're playing against Chris, though. Like, you'll do something like, all right, I'm going to attack, and he goes... He, like, does, like, stuff with his hands, like, he'll tap the tables, and he goes, okay. And then he looks at you in the eyes, he goes, you ready? 22 arcane damage.
Yeah.
I just let him
like,
talk
okay.
for 10 minutes, and then I just like, okay, how much?
It's almost easier as Kano to just say, when your opponent passes the turn to you, and just say, or if they have nothing left in their hand, just say, it's game. Play all the cards out, showing them that you have what combo
like,
it is. Because he's a combo.
You could completely lie to me. You could be like, I'm doing this and this and this, and it's going to deal 15 arcane. I'll be like, okay, I guess I take it. Well, I mean, I'm not going to ask you how, but you did.
It's not worth it.
There is something scary about Kano too in watching your life totals, because there's a certain spot where if Kano's going to die, he's going to throw it all to the wind and he's going to play out his hand. Like, and that may be the thing that does it. He can, so instant speed. So to play on our turn, if you're a Kano player, your opponent has to do something, and then you can react. So you can't start by playing, but your opponent can do something, and there's a reaction step. You can play an instant to that. You can also react to your own instance. So since everything's named the stack now, not the chain, so you literally think of it like a stack. So first in, or first in, last out, whatever.
Yeah.
However it's worded.
Last in.
Whatever goes first is on the bottom, and then everything stacks on top, and then you just go down from there.
Resolve down the line, yep.
Yep.
Which is very important for Kano's combos, too. Not even... Yeah.
And you want to, if you have games you're pretty sure you're due, then you sit there, you wait, and they're like, all right, I'm going to play a non-attack action, this thing gets buffed. I'm going to play a non-attack action, this thing gets buffed. I'm going to pitch this, and I'm going to attack with this. No cards left, maybe like 1 resources left floating, and then the Kano player goes, ah, yes, now's my time to shine. Here we go. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and they're going to do stuff on top of your attack. So your attack here, and then Kano goes, I'm in a Kano. And then that Kano's going to lead to this attack, and that attack's going to lead to this attack. Now, when that resolves, these are going first. So your attack comes last. So if they have game, they have game.
Yeah, it may not get to your attack at all.
Yeah, we may not even reach that point.
Be careful that you don't go to the spot where, like, oh, I can do this card, and I think I can finish him off. Because that's going to be the time where Kano goes, okay, well, I don't have anything to lose, because it looks like I am going to lose.
I had Chris's Kano once, and I let a mispitch and a just looking at card art instead of reading the card be my blunder. But the biggest thing that helped me during that game was that I would just do 1 attack and leave 2 cards in hand. And even if the attack was like, I'm going to attack with a hammer. I was playing Guardian at the time. I was like, I'm going to attack with a hammer. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm probably going to take that. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Arsenal. Do you want to do anything? And it's like, I have 2 cards left in hand. He's like, that's probably 2 blues. If I did something, she could just block it out. So I guess I just won't. And I'm like, all right, cool, Arsenal and pass. And then you just sort of play that sort of little wind down.
Yeah, it's a slow.
it's a game of whittles. Like you're just like, I'm gonna do this little bit, and I'm gonna keep 2 cards in hand, and then the Kano goes, man, those 2 cards. Like I could get lucky, it'd be 2 reds, and they can't do a lot, but it could also be 2 blues, and they just block out everything.
You should never empty your hand against the Kano, essentially.
No, always keep at least a blue or more in hand.
Yeah, keep something in hand, because otherwise you're just telling the Kano player, even if they don't have game, they could just look at their hand, look at their Stormstriders, or maybe even Talismanic Lens, see what's on the top of the deck, and they can just basically look and see, well, they have 15 health, they have no resources in hand, any combo I do is going to be full damage. Maybe I can do 14 damage, bring them down to 1, then at that point, it's very hard for them to not lose at that point.
Yeah.
I would
If
also
they
say
haven't killed the Kano will kill them.
Yeah.
If you listen to some of the other Kano players, I know Justin Graham said he doesn't. I mean, obviously there's an exception to every rule, but he doesn't pop Stormstriders unless he has the kill shot.
No, usually.
Yeah, I would say 99% of the time that's the case. The only time I've probably done it twice outside of the kill shot, and the only times I've done it have been like first turn of the game. The opponent has, their 20 health, and I have the Stir Fork combo, and I can play it exactly out of hand. Or maybe it's their first turn, they play out their hand, they don't have any resources, and I can just go at them for 14, 15 damage first turn, and just basically say, okay, well, they're at 4 life now. They're going to have to defend out everything from here on out, and eventually I'll just get over the top.
And being turn 0, you've now just drawn back up at the end of it. Which, like, Kano, if you're facing Kano, you do not want them to go second. Because they, instead of having, like, your turn 0, their turn 1, it's just going to be Kano gets 2 turns.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends. There are some decks, so I think as a Kano player, there are some decks you want to go first into, some decks you want to go second into. Basically, any deck that causes any sort of disruption, you basically want to go first into, because you don't want them to set up that disruption in any way, or if they do dominate. So basically, if deck does something bad to you, you go first.
So
disruption
and dominate.
Yeah, if Rhinar intimidates you out, if Guardian dominates you out, or if an ice deck, Heart of Ices, or
Channel Lake Frigid,
or Channel Lake Frigids, decks that will do something very bad to you turn 1, you always go turn 1 against them. So that's like your Rhinars, your Lexis, your Oldhams, your Guardian matchups, basically in general. You'll go first against them. Other decks, as Kano, you like to go second because, one, basically it's the same idea of a lot of aggro decks. Like when I play Viserai, I often like to go second because I like to push the tempo first, because whoever is going second is pushing tempo against the opponent's hand. And in Blitz, that can be incredibly important, because if you can present enough damage to take that tempo early, then you'll probably just take it the rest of the game. So any deck that's basically aggro, so like a lot of the runeblade matchups, you'll want to go second as the Kano. And then also, maybe off the off chance that opponent just wants to attack you turn 1 and leave no resources open. I don't know why they would against Kano. Maybe they just don't know what Kano does. Then just free to pitch all your blues, see what's on the top of your deck, and just put in some free damage, draw back up, and then there you go.
The first time you sit across from a Kano, it is a rude awakening.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's
You learn it very quickly.
When he said like about going first and second, like if anyone Heart of Ices you or Frostbites you, you get to respond to that before that Frostbite or Heart of Ice resolves. So make sure you're always like, okay, well, this is the time before you do anything else. Hold up a minute, and then look at your hand, decide if you're gonna do anything, and then either let them go, or that is the time where you're gonna decide, okay, you know what? Let's just do this and get it out of the way.
Yep, which more often than not, as the Kano player, you're just not going to respond. They'll have, if any deck's playing a Heart of Ice, they also have more disruption in the deck. So if you play into that Heart of Ice and then they have any more disruption, it's just, more often than not, that Heart of Ice just stops you dead in your tracks. Unless you truly have game over the top, which decks that run Heart of Ice, which are often like your Oldham typically, they have ways to get around you going over the top too. So it's hard to say. Oldham's the trickiest matchup by far for Kano for this reason, because of Heart of Ice, because they'll often run 4 Arcane Barrier with Crown too. They'll have Crown as well. They have tons of blues. They have tons of disruption like Channel like Frigid, Frostbites. Basically, Oldham they can run 2 Steadfast, they can run Sigil Solace. Basically, Oldham, Valda, that kind of style can really ruin your as Kano. You have to plan your whole deck out, which a good Kano can pitch their combo down to the bottom of the deck and win, if they can live long enough to get to it. But yeah, basically that kind of disruption just changes completely how you play Kano.
One.
But yeah, Kano is fun. If you're looking into getting started into Wizards, really look into deck lists. Like, they are probably the most unique hero, or at least, like, actually I can't just say just Kano, because both Kano and Aslander, they're both extremely unique heroes.
Very hard to build.
They're very hard to build, very hard to master. After doing that, you are going to play a lot of games. You're going to want to play every hero as Kano. So you know how you need to play against that hero in future stuff. And I could not say more than research, because that's going to be your biggest help there too, is looking it up.
Also, if you're playing against a Kano, play Prism. That's all I'm
Yeah, that works.
Prism's a good matchup.
Prism's a good matchup, but I just still think, like, Scour should destroy her. So hard.
How many
What's
Scours
their
do you have in
only
the deck?
thing? Yeah, see, you only have so many Scours.
Yeah.
It's one of your blues, so you have to draw their blues with it.
Yeah, it just so happens, like, in the game that I play, Chris gets both Scours off and destroys all my Seismic Surges, but against Ben, where he's like, I've got 12 auras, doesn't see a single Scour.
As someone who's played Viscera against amount of Kanos, I think the thing they will do is, if they will run Scour, and 2, if you get Scour as the Kano player, arsenal it, and it just sits there until either the other player pops Skeleta, so then you respond. So you think of that stack. So Skeleta, and then your Scour.
That is the biggest just, like, middle finger to the face. Like, you might as well just spit in their direction. Just, like, they're like, all right, pop Skeleta, cool. I have priority for a moment. Scour. I'm gonna destroy all your enchants.
That's just rude.
At that point, you're just like, all right, just scoop it all up, just walk away.
Join the tiny Sonata gang at that point.
And you're like, all right, I'm in Sonata for 2.
Sonata for 3. Pitch 3 blues. Play 9th Blade.
Oh, it's horrible.
It's fun. If you can get a chance to play him in limited, it's interesting. If you have a chance to, like, build him and put him into constructed stuff, I would recommend. He's fun.
For sure.
He's fun, and he'll teach you a ton about the game. I'm fortunate to have the Kano experience a ton, along with playing runeblade. So, like, instance and priority for me is something that makes a lot of sense now. That's translated to Viscerai. I can now get my, let a rune chant pop. Then I can, hold priority, play out Rattlebones, which will then put the Viscerai trigger on the bottom, get an extra rune chant off of that. Or you can play, like, Revel into Revel. But all of that just came from playing Kano over time and knowing how priority and instance work. So it will train you a lot into the game.
That was last week. We talked about Viscera last week.
Disgusting.
We don't want to be sad again.
Arcane damage and instance. It's a principle that will work for both.
Yeah. But yeah. Hopefully this helped you. Thank you, Chris, for joining us this week. Hopefully we'll see you in other weeks too. You can come back. Chris lives a busy life, so we don't get to see him that often.
Pretty good system. So we'll see.
Now I was gonna say, now I say that and you're, like, free for almost every day. Yeah. If you like us, you can like and subscribe, and you can chat with us, and there is a Discord where we talk about things, and there'll be a link in the description for that. I was trying to think of something cool to follow up with, like, put this in the comments, and I can't think of anything.
Guess what? No deep blue, no heart and cross trap.
No argument this week.
It's my finishing
I mean,
words.
it's because, like, he has what he has, and that's all he needs. He doesn't need the ideas of others.
You don't really mix it up all too much.
I'll just finish by saying arcade damage is evil, and I love it. So there you go.
That's fair.
Arcane damage is evil. When you combine arcane damage with physical damage, it's worse than evil.
Therefore, Chris is evil.
If you sit down across a
That's
Kano,
the real-
do not bring Skullcap. Do not use Skullcap. The 3 arcane looks like it'll be useful. It's not. Don't bring it. It's not useful.
Smart Kano will always have less life. Than you.
Yeah, the problem with Skullcap is it's only active when you have less health.
Yeah, it's a trap. You won't be at less health than Kano. He starts at 15. You've already lost the game.
Nourishing.
Kayla, there's Ben, there's Chris, there's the 86. I was not haunted this week. Sad.
That ritual really kept everything out.
We'll do the ritual for next week and get the voice back on.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.
Yeah.